I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about House of the Dragon with cast members Emma Darcy and Olivia Cooke. And Emma, one of the things that I wanted to start off in talking about in terms of Rhaenyra this season is just the way that we meet her at the beginning of this season in such a kind of paralysis state of grief. And I've heard you say that you really enjoyed the opportunity to kind of dig into that side of her and really look at the way that grief can affect people in so many different ways, especially because it feels like such an isolating experience for her. And I was very curious about what that exploration looked like for you to land on the choices that you ultimately made for her.
Yeah, I mean, I think grief is I do think grief is super fascinating. I think in part because it kind of makes you a little foreign to yourself. I think some of like the behaviors that you can find yourself exhibiting are sometimes like fully outside of what you would consider your your like personality remit. And so I suppose I'm like interested in that, and I guess for Rhaenyra, I was interested in the fact that uh, the sort of in terms of like bigger picture stuff, she has no choice in this series other than to uh, seek allies. To like connectivity is going to be super important to her cause in the course of the series, and I think the operation of grief is to do the opposite, to sort of dislocate, to isolate. And so I suppose, yeah, I was interested in a character who begins the series as an island. I mean, to the state of being, non-verbal in the first episode, pretty much. Like so extreme is that stuckness, I guess. Uh, yeah, and so I suppose like reflecting on the series now, I'm aware that like what you watch across the episodes is someone sort of healing, which is or like at least beginning a journey of healing, and like a big part of that being to allow people back in. Yeah, you can't you can't lead without, without like colleagues, yeah. I think like for me probably grief was like the kind of headline thinking about series two and that character.
Absolutely. And, Olivia, it's so interesting to watch Alison's trajectory this season in almost this stripping away of the connectivity to power that she's always had. She's really been raised as someone who is able to command the ear of people, and suddenly she no longer has that. And so it puts her into such a different space. And I was really curious about kind of how you found the impact and the effect that you felt like you wanted that to have on her.
Yeah, it was really interesting actually to sort of come at this character who has this power, and she wields it in a way that is really sort of like serpent-like a lot of the time, and she has the ear of these men, and she can whisper, honey into their ears, and they usually do her biddings, but she was incredibly outnumbered this season, and without the sort of the protection of the King Viserys, she became redundant. Her sons, as naive and young as they are, with little wisdom, got rid of the hand and imposed someone in his space who is incredibly, violent and reactive and younger as well, although we don't really know how old Kristen Cole is. Who's to say? And so yeah, I think the walls were starting to close in on her a little bit, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed sort of playing within the confinements of that space, and also just the freedom that actually allowed her with invisibility, which she then had, becomes a different power that she got to wield, and she got to move within the shadows because people, the kingdom and the court, didn't take any notice of her and thought she was this silly, raving, mad woman who was, screaming into a vacuum.
Yeah, I love that. Emma, kind of jumping off something that you were saying before about Rhaenyra and just that first episode where so much of it is nonverbal. Like, I love your performance in that. And I've heard you say that you actually really enjoyed getting to explore the emotion in that way. And I was just interested in kind of like what you really enjoyed about digging into that and just, finding the subtext instead of it being about the dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, someone said something really beautiful to me. So I suppose like a weird thing is that like just before we shot this series, I was sort of like, I guess, grappling with grief a bit for the first time myself, uh, and as a result, having quite amazing conversations with people, because I suppose when you do go through a bereavement, people they make these amazing, very generous offerings, right? And someone said to me that like in the case of sort of major bereavement, language breaks down, and that we don't have a sort of language. Certainly, I mean, maybe this is like, I think this is probably quite a specifically cultural thing. I think certainly in the UK, we don't have a very sophisticated language to talk about death. And I suppose something that I was thinking about for Rhaenyra is the way that grief and bereavement interact with like legacy. I think even after the death of her father, uh, there's the political gets made sort of ever more personal, like to sit, the idea of sitting in his chair, the idea of sitting in his throne is to sort of, be with him in some embodied way. And so those two desires, those two the sort of ambitious trajectory, the taking up the name, the sort of legacy of like the Targaryen name also becomes a desire to, I don't know, reach towards that absent person, that absent figure. And yeah, and I think like certainly in this series, people, uh, words are the sort of machinery of political design. Like people, the characters in this show tend to use their words to persuade, to manipulate, to sort of envision whatever. And I'm interested in the fact that grief, sort of maybe temporarily, hopefully temporarily, it steals your ability to kind of visualize the future. I mean, it's sort of almost like a bereaved person gets sort of beached with the deceased for a while, and so that stuckness is reflected in an inability to verbalize, and I think what I really love what Ryan and Sarah and the team did in terms of the text, because when she does speak, she sort of lets like rage take over her voice, and I found that exciting because I definitely experience sort of anger as a big uh, a surprising aspect of the grieving process. And I think it's not something that we've seen kind of Rhaenyra unleash that much, or we hadn't seen that much of that rage prior to that episode. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Olivia, for you as well, after there's the moment where she realizes that she has completely misunderstood who should actually take up the throne. I think it's really interesting to watch in your performance just the subtleties of her reckoning with this, because it's not something that she can share with anyone. And so it really is this internalized journey that you're carrying throughout all the rest of the episodes of how does she reckon with this, and the fact that she has been the cause and effect of so many things that are now happening that she wants to try to figure out how to control. And I was interested in just like how you approach that, because I think it's so beautifully performed throughout.
I think that Alison carries with her, and I think for the longest time carried with her a huge amount of guilt and shame that was just sort of a part of her, but really didn't have any way to be channeled. It just sort of was innate within her. And then the amazing thing when you live with shame and guilt and you haven't done anything to sort of like to attach these things to yourself when you're experiencing that for the first time. It was sort of like, I don't know, I wanted her to almost feel known by it at the same time, and to feel marked, and for it to sort of like take over her whole body, and for this to, I don't know, she sort of like wore it on her skin a lot more, and it was just, she became the embodiment of shame and guilt. And I don't know if I'm talking sense at all. I've been on nights for 3 weeks, so I
No, you are. I
like,
was just, you are. I was just thinking, like, even just like picturing her, I know exactly what you're describing. Like it is, it's like on her skin.
yeah, thank you. Does it make sense? I thank you. But I think I really relate to that. Obviously, not on that massive stage where she misheard someone and then, as a result, usurped her stepdaughter, childhood best friend, and now the world that they live in has been, sank into civil war. And so it's just her journey of trying to make these wrongs right again, and what she has to bargain, and what she's willing to do, and how low she's willing to go in order to try and petition to Rhaenyra, or the people that she needs to be in front of, to say, I fucked up and I made a mistake, and actually, like, trying to sort of battle with, is she that sort of person that would own up to her mistake so brazenly? And ultimately, it takes 8 episodes for her to be like, yeah, yeah, that's the only way to do it. And also, she is confronted with both her sons, one who has been, burnt beyond all recognition, and what quality of life is she doesn't even know if he's going to live. And then also, and who also is, unpredictable. And then you've got Aemond as well, who is just so bloodthirsty, and so petulant and so stubborn that he is going to wage war no matter what. Um, and so this feels like, to sort of offer up her, most of her family, aside from Helena and the castle, feels like the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great description of it all. And for both of you as well, I mean, you're both playing these characters who are so often being publicly perceived by people around them, even in their own homes. They're frequently surrounded by so many other people. And so there's this really amazing kind of like subtlety and subtext in both of your performances throughout the show, in that they're very aware of not being able to show certain emotions or to kind of allow people to see too much a lot of the time, and yet we still get that window into everything that's kind of bubbling underneath the surface. And I was just very curious about how you both set about approaching that throughout the series, and thinking very cognizantly about when the emotions can be more on the surface and when they need to be more subdued.
I don't know about you, Emma, but it's not hard to feel like that. You were literally walking into rooms full of men, and the crew is, 200 strong, and you're usually the only, non-male, in the room. So I don't know, you do feel the eyes, and you do feel vulnerable, and it's sort of up to you when to choose to work with that, or when to put on your armor, so to speak. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, the castles that they've built, they're so vast and so massive that you'd feel so dwarfed by them anyway.
yeah. I don't really know what to add. Like those scenes that are so eloquently written, where you have I mean, it's true for both characters. You have a woman who is being sort of perpetually underestimated, fundamentally othered, broadly patronized by their male colleagues. I don't know. It's not like
Hard
it's
to
not
relate
it's
to.
not like one doesn't have a sort of catalogue of lived experience to draw upon. And it's funny. I actually do find. I mean, I guess for Rhaenyra, I'm thinking about sort of council scenes, right? Where we're around the table and Rhaenyra sort of, I don't know, being questioned or ignored or whatever it is, and actually find those days the most tiring, like more tiring than sort of, I don't know, bigger kind of emotional scenes or sort of more action-based stuff. Like, uh, yeah, sitting in sort of stewing, those days where I sit and stew whilst men talk, those are the days that I find the most exhausting. And I am, yeah, and I'm sort of grouchy actually. I'm not that nice to be around, I think, on those days. But
Yeah. And you become hysterical because you're, over the course of 2 days, which is how long most of these small council scenes take to film, you're petitioning into the
yeah.
void and being ignored for 2 days straight. And so you do come away with it being like, your spikes are up and you just feel insane.
I also wanted to jump into talking about episode 3, where your characters get to come back together, because, you know, there's all this history and anger and frustration, but also this love and this real yearning for connection between the two of them. And I was really interested in how you both said about going into a scene like that, because I think anytime the two of them together, it's not just whatever's happening in that moment, it's the history of going all the way back to their childhood that comes into play every single time as well.
I think I was like completely hysterical. I was so happy to get to like do some acting with you. I like the whole thing is sort of like blur to me actually. But I mean, look, like from my perspective, like that's where like so much of the joy and fun is, right? Because there's so much history. There's like so much that lives between these characters. But you know, I'm also like I'm in disguise. Like there's also like a silliness at play. Like
You're in a habit.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I suppose that feels it feels a bit Game of Thronesy to me, actually. Like, you know, these sort of delicious moments where characters collide and the context is doing so much of the work, and there's a sort of giddiness in the air just because of the chemistry, I suppose. Yeah, like so fun. I don't know. I just saw someone sent me a clip recently of us. Someone, it's like obviously BTS, and it's when we're trying to work out the knife stuff. And it's just funny because I just got this like I'm like crying, laughing as I like sort of stab you in the tummy. I don't know, and I'm wearing like a bit, and it's just like the whole thing looks like completely mad.
Send it me.
I will, I will. Yeah, sorry, I don't have like an illuminating thing. Like,
No, I don't have anything really, really, yeah, inspired to say about the acting. I just remember how, without even trying over the course of the scene, even though you've got a knife to my stomach, we just become bickering girls
yeah,
again, bickering childhood friends, and it's just, I don't know, that's what I love about Rhaenyra and Alicent. No matter what, they come back to the center, which is them as girls who love each other and friends and like each other's first love. And I don't know, I find that the most delicious because aside from the big sept that we're in and the whole world, the fantastical world that we're in, it is just these two people who are so deeply wounded by each other.
and actually just like thinking about, I think something that was really nice, just sort of practically about shooting that is like there's some like you get some pages, you've got like some time, and I think we were quite fortunate. I feel like we had quite a lot of time to shoot it, and
Mhm.
I don't know, like this is not always the case, but like like I'm so lucky, like I get to shoot with Liv, and as a result, like there's like loads to discover in the process of shooting, and so I guess for me that's like the most like pleasurable type of work, right? Because actually the longer you do it, the more sort of reveals itself in the text, and
Mm.
uh yeah, and that actually what you're saying is so true, like that they sort of revert to type, that they in the course of speaking to one another, they make a journey all the way back to the beginning, to children, and there's a sort of madness in seeing where you've ended up. There's a slight, like when you run into someone who knew you as a child, you sort of see yourself suddenly from without as an adult, and I think I felt something of that in that. I mean, they're also sort of talking about how the hell did we end up here in the text. And I felt that, I think.
Yeah, it's whenever you go back home,
Mm.
you revert to the age you were when you left, in a way. And yeah, and to what you said when, you know, how the text reveals itself, Reese, whenever we did a scene, he'd always be like, you know, and we'd go through it a few times, and then we'd, you know, we'd do the wides, and then we'd come in and we'd still be trying to work it out, and he'd be like, oh, there it is, I can hear the music. And it is like, once a scene sort of like starts to click, and you understand actually what the, you know, the subterranean emotions are, that's when you start to hear it.
Yeah. Olivia, one of the other scenes that I wanted to ask you about specifically as well was the moment where Alicent sheds her outer layer of clothing and steps into the water, because it's this real, you know, shedding of everything. And it really kind of speaks to that journey that she's on that you were talking about at the beginning, you know, and just this moment of potentially becoming the version of herself that she wants to be in the world, whether that's going to happen or not. And I was just really, really interested in just hearing a little bit about what felt important to you going into that sequence, because it's such a great moment.
Yeah, I think I wanted it to feel like a baptism as much as possible. I wanted it to feel like Alison was trying to, you know, become pure in whatever form that took, but like pure in her actions from there on out. Whether she does or not, who knows what the writers have written. But that's what I wanted for that moment. And also, you know, she's away from the castle for the first time in her life, from away from court, away from eyes. She's never been so alone. And I wanted that to feel incredibly liberating as well, because it's not often we can just, as you know, I can't, you know, I would love to just like find a random lake and strip off and go swimming in it, but that would be really scary. And and it wouldn't feel safe. But here she's got the opportunity where there's no one around, and all she has to do is just shed that skin, shed that layer, and try and make herself anew again. Yeah.
Do you think Alicent is a natural camper?
I think she took to it like a duck to
Yeah.
water. I think she really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
She literally went out and touched grass, and she was like, "Oh my God, I'm grounded."
Hemp, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She did a lot of grounding that day, and maybe she did some mushrooms and had like a really
Had a gong bath, yeah.
yeah, and then just floated on her back.
It's such a great question. I love it. Emma, I also wanted to talk about Rhaenyra's relationship with Daemon this season, because it's always been such an interesting dynamic to them, where he really represents what she wishes that she could be in a lot of ways, just with that sense of freedom that he feels that she struggles with more internally. You know, and especially I'm realizing now how much they took away all of your main co-stars with Olivia and Matt, having so many scenes without them. But wanted to ask in particular about that moment where Daemon kind of comes back to her and he's like, I realize now that like you are the person and the only person that can really unite everybody, and kneels down in front of her, and just how that really shifted so much of their dynamic and some of the resentment that she'd been carrying throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I think they are sort of quite profoundly connected characters, sort of even when they're at a distance or whatever, and they sort of live in strange counterpoint. And part of that is jealousy, and part of it's envy, and part of it's pride. And I suppose something that I really noticed this season was that they are totally incapable of being of sharing their own weakness. Like this is not a sort of healthy relationship in which those parties are like communicating. You know, they're sort of their like erotic energy, their strength, their sort of romance. can only operate in quite specific circumstances. And we meet them both at the beginning of the series in a state of grief that they can't share. They're both sort of shut down. They're both, and I suppose what I noticed about that reunification at the end of the series is like, they're back both, well, Rhaenyra certainly is sort of back inside her love language, or her erotic language rather, like she's finally moving towards a state of sort of political and sort of personal emotional power. I mean, I find it hard, almost kind of hard to answer fully your question, because I'm sort of waiting also to find out how that now resolves, because in the series we see this moment where he confirms that he's raised an army in her name. Okay, great. I feel like there's more to say, there's a bigger conversation to be had. And I mean, I really like the sort of shorthand of Rhaenyra saying, to sort of threatening that he better never leave again, and he sort of says, I've tried, I can't, I've tried. Even so, I wonder what the quality of their kind of reunification will be going forward. I don't know the answer to that yet. Yeah, I'll be very curious to find out. Yeah.
Can't wait till we get to find out more about that. Olivia, in terms of the sequence with Rhaenyra and Alicent at the end of the season, I've heard you say that it felt really important to you to play to and focus on the internal struggle of, ultimately, I don't want this to be the outcome and what needs to happen, but I recognize that this is the only way through. And, that also just like that inner hope of like, maybe she'll turn around and give me an out or come up with some other idea. And so I just wanted to ask about the way that that really focused and centered the scene for you.
Yeah, she's going there asking for forgiveness, asking her to spare herself and to spare Helena. And then she's not offering up, her just in case trump card until the end, when she realizes that no, Rhaenyra is serious. Like, the optics of this, if I go and take the castle but I don't have Aegon's head, like, it's not legitimate at all. And that's such an impossible decision to make, that I just wanted the acknowledgement of that statement and that ask to to sort of to almost barely register with Alicent. It's such a quick acknowledgement and just a quick agreement that then it's sort of like she's just like, I need to go, I need to breathe and get out of this space, because I don't know, like, how it's such a mad thing to have to act. And I mean, I'm pretty sure that I probably won't have to experience anything like that in my life. So I just wanted to show Alicent sort of grieving for that in real time, as she's trying to bargain and spare her own life and the life of her daughter Helena, who is just so innocent in all of this. And she's coming there with an insanely guilty conscience, and there's no front. Her tail is firmly between her legs. She fucked up massively, and all this wouldn't have happened if she hadn't have misheard or misunderstood what Viserys was saying in his dying breath. So yeah, it's an incredibly shameful thing that Alicent has to do.
Definitely. Emma, I also wanted to ask you about your short film that you currently have, The Talent, and working on that as both an actor and a producer, along with Thomas May Bailey, who's the director of it, and just the experience of stepping into a short film and what felt really creatively fulfilling about that for you.
Yeah, honestly, it was so amazing. I mean, I used to do a little bit of like, well, like I used to do production within like a theatre context, but sort of small scale and yeah, within sort of fringe theatre, I know the workings. I can be a sort of safe pair of hands in that context, and this was completely new, and that was a long way outside of my comfort zone, I suppose. Even even the sort of the like nuts and bolts of a set, even even on a small scale, was like was a kind of sort of brand new language to me. Um, all that said, yeah, it's been like a total joy, and I think something that I really like and feels kind of revelatory for me about the actor producer kind of combo within a screen context is like it allows me to have a more direct relationship with an audience. So, like, obviously, when you're an actor on stage, you are the person, you are the agent who delivers the product, the object to the audience, and I think I really cherish that direct line of communication. And normally, when you act for screen, that's more dislocated because it's really the director, producer, editor who kind of who complete that, and other people who deliver it. And so I loved staying with the work. It felt like really, it felt more natural to stay with the work through to the end. And yeah, and yeah, it's been exciting. Like I sort of, it was a to some extent it was an experiment in a new medium, quite specifically trying to sort of deliver sort of vast interiority and plot in a really small time frame. And it's had a really nice life, and it's cool that you can, make something in a garage and then it be seen, internationally. It's like a very exciting thing. And yeah, so we're having like a pop at sort of awards now, and yeah, but it's been like a total joy and a massive education for me.
It's so
Yeah.
good. Have you seen it, Mara?
Yeah, it's really, really great. And I love kind of the juxtaposition of the performance with like the two different setups in it. It's fantastic.
It's so
Um,
beautiful, isn't it?
yeah, Olivia, I saw you kind of like nodding a little bit at what Emma was saying. Have you kind of found that same experience for yourself as a producer as well in the projects that you've worked on, and just how you feel like it really kind of connects you to the idea of the audience differently?
Yeah, I'm realizing that as Emma said that, I was like, yes, I have had that experience. I just Emma has an amazing way of putting into words things that I have felt for a long time, and I'm like, yes, that is. Um, but yeah, it's I don't know, you just feel more emboldened, and you just feel like your voice is being heard. And I think there's sometimes with I don't know how I found in my career and being an actor, and I've been, and maybe just being a lady, it's like this thing of like being really good, just being like good, and not ruffling feathers, and not speaking up because you don't want to look like a bitch, and sometimes your creativity gets a bit dulled by that as well. So yeah, I mean I love putting a producerial hat on, and really like delving into the gristle and the guts of a script, and making it something that feels like a team effort. And in the best moments it feels like summer camp, because you're all just plowing in and making something beautiful. And it's the experience of that I feel is the most joyous and the most fulfilling than actually like the product that you eventually come out with.
I think you're such a natural born producer. Like I mean, like actor too. Like you're good at that as well. But I just think,
This is
like
you telling me, give it
makes
up.
so much sense that like yeah. I don't
Thank
know.
you.
You're like watching everything in like so many dimensions at the same time. It'd be crazy to like not be not be doing that.
Oh, Thanks,
I also
Emma.
love it in regards to both of your careers, because I think you both have such interesting taste in terms of the projects that you make and the collaborators that you kind of really seem to be magnetized and drawn to. So thank you so much for talking about all of this, and congratulations on obviously another amazing season of House of the Dragon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Such beautiful questions, so thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.